Hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. You have reached one of our year-end episodes. We are deep in the weeds of product recommendations for this year, and joining the show are always faithful editor-in-chief Mark Phillips. How are you, brother?
I am tired. I have literally just put the finishing touches on the 2024 Buyer's Guide from Part-Time Audiophile. So literally just before I got onto the podcast with you, I said, okay, it's done. I did the last thing. I can go relax for a couple of days, maybe even listen to my system, which I haven't been able to do for... This has been 2023 has been kind of a tough year for like having the time to actually do my job, which is listening to hi-fi.
Tough job, but someone's got to do it, I'm sure.
When I get to listen to music, it's the greatest job in the world.
Today's episode of the Occasional Podcast is sponsored by Purist Audio Design. Quality audio deserves quality sound, like the purest of diamonds. Purist Audio Design, one of the originals and high-end, just launched their Diamond Revision. With improved metallurgy, flexibility, and enhanced shielding to protect your system from RFI, EMI, interference from noisy wireless devices, the Diamond Revision, just like all of Purist cables, is made right here in the US of A. For over 35 years, Purist Audio Design has passionately made high-end, handcrafted audio cables designed specifically for the needs of your system. They list their specs, such as resistance and shield quality, and you can find them at PuristAudioDesign.com. Purist Audio Design is veteran-owned and available worldwide. Today's episode of the Occasional Podcast is sponsored by Inuos. Inuos engineers innovative, artful, hi-fi products that deliver unexpected warmth and accuracy. Products that unleash the full potential of digital music playback. Going beyond simple ones and zeros, Inuos products elevate music enjoyment by offering true audiophile performance from your digital music library or hi-fi streaming service. Find an Inuos dealer near you to hear the difference. It's funny because a lot of times when you do something wrapped around your passion like we do, you find that what doing the passion bit ends up being a smaller and smaller percentage over the years. Or at least when you first perceive, like, I can't wait to sit around and listen to music while, you know, a lot of the job is doing a lot of other things that aren't exactly listening to music, as you just said. But when you get to do that thing and that thing is focused around your job, it is a fun thing. So passion projects.
It is.
Yes. Now, what we're passionate about in the podcast here is actually broken out into a whopping 12 categories in the Part-Time Audiophile Buyer's Guide. 12 posts up on the website. It's lovely. Beautiful pictures, beautiful words by the staff, and Mark put it all together. So this is a wrap-up podcast to kind of help hone you in the correct direction. But if you want to see everything, you want to see the reference material, go to the website, parttimeaudiophile.com, or the newly updated URL, Mark, I don't know if you knew this, pt.audio. Because I think there's a very good point, at least with that. And I know we don't want to wax poetic about URLs too much, but Part-Time Audiophile is a lot to put into the URL. It's a lot to put into a browser. pt.audio is just going to be a lot snappier. So I'm excited about not having to enter that in as much as I've had to in my life. I'm sure I do it as much as you guys do. But PT Audio, that's the new URL. Anyways, I digress. So what we're offering here is more of a basic summary of what's in there. If you want to see all the details, dive in. There's so much. We could never make it through in one podcast. We've done so many reviews over the years, and there's so much fun stuff for this year specifically. We're just going to try to focus on what's going on in the moment, what we've heard. And Mark, if you want to kind of talk a little bit about the parameters of the Buyer's Guide, but the Buyer's Guide is essentially a collection of the best of stuff that we all collectively have reviewed. Is that correct?
It's stuff that we reviewed. It's stuff that we like. It's stuff that we own it. There's a few cases in this latest edition where it was just, I went somewhere and listened to it for a few days. Sometimes I do these events, and it's almost like a review where it's so concentrated on this one thing that I feel when I walk away that I almost have enough the same amount of information as if I had actually taken it home. And so we include those. And in many cases, too, we have a lot of stuff that we put on there that we wind up following up with a formal review sometime after that.
We've heard them. They either have a formal review available on the site or a review will be coming, or we've spoken to it, but we've spent time with these products, listened to them, critiqued them, and loved them. So I think one of the first categories that I wanted to talk about is headphones.
Headphones.
Because a lot kind of happened this year in headphones. The category continues to show a lot of growth, which is cool. It has a very vibrant community online, I think, and it's one of those things that really saw a lot of growth in the year of the pandemics. So the pandemics, people went home, they listened more, they didn't have as much time to spend listening to big speakers because everybody was in the house. So we got a lot of growth in the category. We got a lot of, though, unfortunately, during that same time period, we had a lot of backup with supply chain, and a lot of new products were delayed. So things are kind of getting caught up now, and this is good. This is like consistent across all of the categories. So what we're seeing this year is a little bit more product announcements, some stuff that got backed up. Supply, I don't know if it's exactly meeting with demand, but we're able to get stuff out into the market. And a lot of the R&D that was being worked on that came to a halt in the pandemic. And we're seeing the products come out now, which have been in development or were on delayed development for a while. And now it's taken a while for everything to catch up. And here we are with some fun stuff. I do think when you look at our list, you will see a lot of our experience with Focal has done a great job in terms of their product category. We spoke about this in other podcasts where Focal kind of has something for everybody. When they span the price points, they tend to do really well at their price level. And they offer so many price levels. They've kind of worked it out where I think that you see a lot there because they know how to look at the grand scheme of things and approach things from certain price points. So they aren't like the winner in every single category every time, but when they do it really well. So you kind of see it in the list a lot more than the other ones because we have a lot of experience with them, and they make a lot more headphones than most people per price point.
And I think that Focal really hit the ground running on their headphones. So the first time I heard a pair was just about 3 or 4 years ago, and I went, oh my gosh, these are fantastic. So, why did it take them so long to do this? So I know that we have a heavy lean toward that brand. Also with Name Audio, they're the same company, Focal Name. The two offer a lot of really good headphone products between the two of them. And so we wind up reviewing them together because they're voiced together in a lot of instances.
Yeah, and specifically on the list, we have the Celeste at the 1K mark, the Clear MG at the 1.5 mark.
Those might be my favorite headphones.
And then I have to throw down, too, because they updated the Utopia last year, and I'm sure we mentioned it. But the Utopia, to me, was one of those headphones when I heard the price point, and I was like, wow. And then I heard the headphone, and I'm like, thank God. Because they kind of like hit the price point right, and it's such a hard thing to do when you go for the sky. So at $5K, it is a contender, and it is a great headphone if you can afford it. Obviously, I have a ton of experience with the LCD 5 around that same price point, which I also love. So if you're a collector, I would say get the 5 and the Utopia because they both offer a little bit of different flavor. But again, this is very expensive stuff. Mark, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a couple of new headphones on the list from ZMF that you have experience with. Can you kind of tell us about your experience with the ZMF offerings on the list?
So my decision to get back into headphones for Part-Time Audiophile, there was a couple of years ago where we were genuinely saying, should we still be doing this? Do we still need to cover headphones? There are so many other publications that are dedicated to this that we felt do a better job. They were more in touch with everything. And I decided I wanted to keep going with headphones for two reasons. Number one, I still like listening to them and I like playing around with them. And number two, we can kind of do a thing where we're examining headphones not from the HeadFi crowd as much as just audiophiles who still love to listen to headphone gear like I do. And so I'm kind of judging in the same way I would judge a 2-channel audio system. And I think just concentrating on sound quality is a good enough reason for me to keep doing it. So 2 things happened this year in headphones that kind of got me excited. Number one was these 2 ZMF headphones. The Atrium Closed for $2,500 a pair, and the Calderas for $3,500 a pair. And they're beautiful, beautifully made. They're custom wooden cups. They're just gorgeous in every way, but they also manage to sound really incredible. So I got these 2 in. I noticed that I really wanted to have something good in terms of amplification to use them with, because I knew these were lofty headphones probably, but I knew that they were really good. And so one of the things I did was I made a concerted decision earlier to buy the Name 850 integrated amplifier just as a backup amplifier for me. And you can read the review of that and see, all the reasons why I had to buy one. But a lot of it is because it has a really good inboard headphone amp, and it's the one that's used in Name's much more expensive streamers. So I knew it was a good headphone. They've always had pretty good headphone amps inside their products. So I stuck with it and I really liked it. But as soon as I got the ZMFs and the Name in position, started getting a bunch of other amplifiers, a lot of other gear, and so actually made out space in my living room on my coffee table to set up a headphone listening station, just like you see at Moon Audio at the shows. It's been really fun, and I'm enjoying it. I'm going to kind of keep it going. But the ZMFs this is something like, it's kind of, for me, it's setting a new standard for me to judge other things against, because I really, really responded to these immediately. It was the first time I'd ever heard them. When I strapped them on my head, it was the first time I'd ever heard a ZMF. And so I'm really happy and they're very nice people too. There's so much to like about them. The review will actually be coming before the end of the year.
Those 2 headphones that you reviewed,
Atrium Closed.
And the Caldera, $3,500. Yep, and the Atrium Closed at $2,500. So yeah, they have like a very bespoke feel.
Oh, beautiful wood finishes.
Yeah. And then in the headphone category for amplification, you already mentioned the Name, but we have the Unity Atom there as well, and I'm a big fan of the Unity line by Name. They're kind of like an all-in-one with the streamer.
Right.
Saves on cables, saves on separate components. I kind of feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, for the size, they pack it all in there and look cool. There's not that many products out there that look high-end industrial design, stream gorgeously, flawlessly, and do great sound. And they're really expensive stuff. But again, just all the things in one little spot. Love that. So that's the Unity Atom Headphone Edition, but they also make the integrateds, and I'm sure that the integrateds appear on other spots too here. But the Unity line, they kind of like all put it together, and it's not, because as you guys know, the Name stuff can go very, very high, and even though this is like $4,000 for the headphone edition, and they go higher than that, these are kind of like that high-end feel, but not quite 10 Gs. So yes, expensive. I'll be the first to admit that, but also a lot of cool things for some decent industrial design. One of the other things that I see on the list that I really like has been my favorite for a while is the WA33 by Woo Audio as a flagship amplifier. It's built like a tank. It looks gorgeous. It has a great tube flagship sound to it. I was also introduced this year to another amp by them that I really like, which is the WA5. This is an integrated second-gen headphone and integrated amplifier. It's 6.5K. It's 2 chassis. It's maybe a bit overkill. It's built around the 300B. It's like 2 huge tanks in your living room, but I just can't get enough of it because it's so ridiculous and it sounds so gorgeous. So the WA5, it's still out there. It's in its 2nd gen. It's this really kind of hilariously amazing looking amp. So that's my other thing. Mark, what else do you have in that category?
So we have a couple of other headphone amplifiers in there. The first one is the Audion. They make tube amps. They're out of the UK. And this is the Audion Silver Knight 300B 30th anniversary edition. So it is basically a headphone amplifier. It has lots of features on it. For the last couple of years, I've told myself there's a lot of great amplification with 300Bs lately, and I'm not getting any of it. So I've been trying to get some 300B amps in. First one I finally got was this Audion, which has that same 300B sound that everybody loves, that kind of warm liquid but real natural sound to it, but in your head. And I've been having a lot of fun with that. And then the second one is from a brand new company called Austin Audio Works, and they sent along both their phono preamp and a headphone amplifier, and you can actually use them together. There's an umbilical power thing, so you can just one power where you can run them both. And this is real simple stuff in terms of construction. It's not fancy stuff. Each one is $1,650, and the sound quality is just phenomenal on these. So you'll be hearing more about this company. But for $1,650, there's a phono stage and there is a headphone amp, and they are both, just great values.
Today's episode of the Occasional Podcast is brought to you by Hi-Fi Rose. Hi-Fi Rose streamers give you a beautiful, intuitive interface, sleek design, and incredible sound quality from your digital music library and favorite streaming services, such as Apple Music, Tidal, Qobuz, and more. There really isn't anything else like Hi-Fi Rose, which is why it is the streamer of choice for audiophiles all over the world. Visit HiFiRoseUSA.com to find your nearest retailer or order online. The future of music awaits you. I want to cut straight to turntables from this point. We're going to do what they call a pivot. Away from headphones and into spinning black discs.
Turntables.
There's a lot of great stuff in there. Project debut Carvin Evo is a great one for starters. We have the Rega Planar 3. Of course, the Technics SL1500C is in there as well. But Mark, tell me a little bit about what happened with you and Music Hall this year on the turntable front.
I've been spending a lot of time with this Music Hall Stealth turntable, and this is their direct drive model. It comes with tone arm and an Audiophile 2M blue cartridge. That's normally $230-something for this. And so it comes with it already mounted. The easiest turntable I've ever had to set up. I believe the only thing I really had to do was set the tracking force, and everything else was pretty spot on. I've been scratching my head over this because it's so good. Really good. For $16.95, I haven't heard anything anywhere near the price that came close to what this is doing. It's just one of those turntables that's just not doing anything wrong. It sounds really good. And so it sounded so good that I've started playing around with more expensive phono stages and cartridges and phono cables and that sort of thing, just to see how far I can push this stealth. And it keeps going. I think this is a real sleeper. I think, I've known Roy Hall for many, many years and talked in the past about workhorse turntables, just having something that's reliable in there and sounds good and that you don't have to think about all the time. Here it is. It's an amazing little turntable, and I'm having fun with it.
So, yeah, I actually got a chance to hear this turntable at Capitol Audio Fest this year, just a couple months ago, and I got a chance to speak with Roy Hall of Music Hall, and it looks amazing. It sounded great, but I was actually quite impressed with the tone arm assembly part. It looked really high-end for the price point. It looks like a very sophisticated assembly that keeps it going there.
Really nice finish and fit on the thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Feels like high end, even though obviously with the price point, it's not cheap again, but it's also, as you know, turntables go crazy high. So I'm not surprised that it sounds great in a review setting at all, Mark. It looks like it's got some fixins, as I like to say, to it. So that part's really cool. And I got to give them props because I think I said this in my write-up about it, is that the blue cartridge, if it's going to come with a cartridge, it's a pretty darn good cartridge to come with, isn't it?
I think so. I think that for moving magnet cartridges for under $250, I think it stands alone. There's just not a lot that sounds as musically right. And every time I hear a 2M Blue, and even for Will, I was a couple years ago, I spent some time with the 2M Red, which is only $100. It's kind of crazy. It's like, does it really sound this good? Am I missing something? I listen mostly to expensive moving coils whenever I can. And I always expect I'm going to really miss it when I listen. But when I listen to one of these Audiophile 2Ms, I'm a big fan. The affordable moving magnet cartridge, the one to beat.
Not to leave out the ultra high-end guys, because let's be honest, if you're really drooling over a couple of turntables, I think it's safe to recommend, if you got deep pockets, the Acoustic Signature Typhoon Neo looks gorgeous. the VPI Industries HW40 and the
I think TW Acoustics Raven AC?
LS.
I forgot.
LS. Those are all in the $20K range. But if you really want to wow some friends, they look gorgeous. Gorgeous.
Digital playback devices.
On the subject of source material, I think one of the biggest growth categories, aside from all that fun stuff coming out in the headphones, is also continued technological advances that we got in digital playback. Because when you think about it, turntables, it's refining something that's been refined quite a bit. Digital, there is probably the greatest room for growth still. Now, they've kind of gotten stuff under control just 10 years ago. It could have been, some of the cheap stuff was a little bit touch and go. But now, Mark, you want to go out kind of explain your experience with digital source, digital players, digital everything this year?
Well, I got to play with a lot of digital this year. Like I said, I started out 3 or 4 years ago saying, yeah, I want to start reviewing affordable DAC. Sounds like pretty easy to get into. I wasn't really that knowledgeable about all the latest digital formats and such, but I did get into streaming a few years ago. Anything that could help me stream, I was eager to listen to. So, that means DACs, hooking up a DAC to the laptop. But now this year I had several products that really, really pushed me in terms of my knowledge of these kind of products. Number one was the Antipodes Oladra music server, which is, it's $29,000. And when I first started playing with it, I was like, am I the guy for this? Because this is a very sophisticated piece of gear and it does everything. And that was one of the challenges I had reviewing it, was that it takes more than the typical review period to just explore this thing and find out everything it does. But what I did learn from that is that products like music servers and streamers as well will make you get rid of your laptop as a digital source. You will not want to use it as a musical server anymore. I was happy to just plug in a DAC into my laptop and stream Kobas, all day long, and I'd be happy. But once you start dealing with things like dedicated streamers and servers, all of a sudden you're at a different level. And that's something I learned with the Antipodes. And I also learned that with another one that's listed that we haven't reviewed yet, but it's coming soon, is the Inuos Pulsar. And the Inuos Pulsar, that's from their Pulse line, which is their first streamers. They're not servers, they're streamers. They're known for their servers. And so I got to play with the Pulsar, which is the top of the line from the Pulse. It's $79.99. It's just like getting a new pair of speakers that are twice as good as the ones you were using before, in terms of just pushing it and going, oh, this is why people do this. This is why people no longer use their laptops. I've had a couple of exceptional DACs this year. The first was Marison. It's the new DAC 1 Mark II, which it sounded absolutely superb. And then I also played with the Computer Audio Design, the 1543 DAC, which was a $15,000 DAC. So it kind of makes it the most expensive DAC I've ever played with. But man, the sound quality on that thing was gorgeous.
I think you bring up a really interesting point, is that a lot of times with the streamers, once you get past the initial installation phase, the setup phase is a lot easier, because if you're not into the crazy bits and pops of digital audio, which is great if you are, and I know there are a lot of guys out there that love the tech side of it, and that's awesome that if you want to, there's plenty of products out there for you. But sometimes when you get into the digital streamers and the DACs, and it's kind of more just plug and play, I think it gets you a little bit better sound with a little less huff and fuss, which is such a great thing to see. And I feel like that's where we're heading with these streamers and the DACs, is a little bit higher end sound with a little less work for the consumer, which is really a win in both directions, if you ask me.
Yeah, it should be a seamless thing. Streaming should be just something that it appears out of nowhere. You want to see something cool? There's no physical formats anywhere, but you're going to hear this incredible sound. I'm going to be on my little phone over in the corner. You're not even going to see what I'm doing, and I'm going to play any music you want. And have it sound as good as it did. At least for this year, I heard some great digital sound.
And just a quick side note on music. If you listen to music, I think we saw Weird Al Yankovic come on the on the social medias yesterday or this last week or so saying he doesn't make much from streaming. So while I'm in full support of streaming for the convenience, I think we've said this before in previous podcasts way back, but I want to reiterate again. If you want to support your artists, buying vinyl is like a way to vote for them. You can also buy CDs. There's some great CD players out there. But if you go buy vinyl, they get more money. Curate through digital and vote through vinyl. So buy vinyl because it gives them more money. And the whole point of Weird Al was that he doesn't make much money from streaming. So I think that's a really cool way to like discover new music and play the stuff you want with love and convenience. But if you really want to support the guys, buy vinyl. That's kind of where the direction I've been too, is where I go to a show. I try to buy it directly at the show because you're not going through a distributor at that point. Yes, there's pressings and costs and that. But when you buy it from them, buying merch and buying vinyl at the show is probably the most money you can get them. But, that's just my 2 cents on the music thing as things continue to change and evolve, and we want more great music to be made.
Integrate amplifier.
Mark, what are your highlights from integrated amplifiers?
There were 2 really good ones this year, and they're very different from each other, which is part of what I like about them. But the first one was from a company called Audio GD, and it was kind of hard to wrap your head around that means, but this is basically, it's a Chinese company, and they've been making amplifiers for about 20 years. They partnered up with Underwood Hi-Fi, and every time we do the LSA Underwood Hi-Fi stuff, they have a lot of different brands that they work with. We're always surprised at just the value. This is really good stuff. They came up with this integrated amplifier, and I got it in, and first of all, it's 100 pounds. And I had one reader say, all I know about this is it's heavy. It's like, well, it is heavy just to show the point that this is not a Class D. They're not taking the easy way out. This is a 100-pound heavy amplifier, right. 250 watts per channel. It was just built like a tank, beautiful build quality. And I used it for the first few months I was in the new house. Wasn't really thinking about it too much because it was just in there doing its job quietly. And then pretty soon I started to notice it's like, this is really, really good. And the more I listened to it, the more I really loved it. And the crazy thing about this just beautiful, huge, heavy, impressive looking amplifier, it's $39.99. So it's one of my favorite values of the year, definitely. And so the second one is the integrated that I had was the one I've been waiting to get in my hands for, been trying to work this out for the last year. But I finally got a new Alnick amp, T1500 Mark II integrated amplifier. It is 300B, 10 watts per channel. This thing is just knocking me off. It is gorgeous. It is tactile. It is warm. It runs its fingers through my hair while I'm listening. It's just, it's just a beautiful, beautiful integrated. And I really do like Alnick. I like Alnick a lot. They have a much larger integrated that I reviewed that had KT150s, I believe. And it had like 65 watts per channel, and it did, it ran everything, and I love that thing. This is different. It's 300 Bs, and like I said, when I talked about the Audion, it's like I've really missed 300 Bs, haven't heard them enough, and now I think it's like, I'm just so happy with this thing right now.
Just to throw back, the Name Nate 50 is on the list as well that we were talking about previously, so that guy too.
And the Name Nate 50 is on the list, so that thing gets used every single day in so many different ways. And I'm hearing from people who bought one too, and they think it might be Name's best amplifier ever, best sounding one. I think that might be a possibility. I mean, they only made 1,973 of them. And that's the reason I bought one, because I didn't want them to, fly away before I had a chance to consider it. So I just went out and bought it, and I'm very happy with my buying decision. Power amplifiers.
Mark, what do we got in the fun section of the power amplifier category?
Underwood Hi-Fi. And this is under their Emerald Physics line. And John Richardson reviewed it. It is basically a 600 watt per channel Class D amplifier for $2,000. And John had so much fun with this little amplifier. Do you need a lot of power? Not have a lot of money? Want to sound good? This is one of the most interesting and fun power amplifiers that we've covered in quite some time.
of course, at the top of the list, we have the VAC statement 452 IQ music block. If you really are feeling spendy, those are the flagship 75K, but also True Life Audio SSA 300s at 75K. And then we move on to Amps and Sound. So Amps and Sound have made a kind of interesting cross-section of high-end tube sound mono blocks.
We had two reviewed recently, and the one is the Casablanca, and the other one is the flagship Arch, which for $50,000 a pair, they really impressed the reviewer, Sam Rosen. He went nuts over them.
What high-end list? This is above $40,000. Wouldn't be complete without Dan D'Agostino, the Momentum S250 MXV at $45,000. It sounds great, but the amount of metal he puts into the industrial design, I know I'm harping on industrial design this time around, but it just looks like eye candy. It's like jewelry, audio jewelry. Lovely stuff. He's on there too. And then we have some of our Pass Lab buddies. Oh, also, let's throw out there, Border Patrol has some interesting stuff in terms of their P21 EXD and the SC300B EXD around 13.5. So he loves the 300Bs. We've been talking about the 300Bs. Let's throw another 300B on the list. Now,
absolutely.
Pivot. This is the two categories. If you're like me, you've probably been waiting around for. We're going to hit the floor standing speakers and the bookshelf. You know what? Let's do bookshelf first. Let's get it out of the way, and then we can go to the big honkers.
Bookshelf speakers.
Mark, let me know. I know you're a bookshelf guy. We talk about this all the time. What was best in bookshelf speakers for 2023, looking out into 2024?
So I moved into my new house in the beginning of July. And that was one of the funny things was that, hey, I've got this huge listening room now. I can review all these big speakers. And my first 4 or 5 models that I reviewed were all still two-way monitors. This buyer's guide is full of a lot of those things I've been listening to the second half of this year. The one right now I'll tell you that you probably don't know about is Alexandria Audio. And the name of the speaker is just called The Monitor. Alexandria Audio, The Monitor. And this is a 8-inch two-way. It's a large monitor, physically large for a two-way monitor, but it's also really light. So when you pick it up, it's like, oh, what's going on here? Well, it turns out, and I didn't really notice it at first, this is a speaker that comes from Bali, from Indonesia. I thought they were good with my normal setup until the Alnic Audio T1500 integrated arrived with its 10 watts per channel, 300Bs, and the combination of these two is just magnificent. I think they're my biggest surprise of the year. The other ones, it's actually a 3-way stand-mounted monitor, but it's the one from Piega from Switzerland, and it's the Coax 411. Beautiful aluminum enclosure, has ribbon tweeter and mid-range in a coax formation. And I sat these down and I listened to them, and I just said, you know what, they're $10,000 a pair, which is kind of the average of what I look for in this kind of category that I focus on. But $10,000, I noticed that it was one of those two-way monitors that had jumped up to the next level in terms of performance, that it was doing things that you normally don't associate with two-way monitors. It sounded huge, without limits. It energized the room, and I was really surprised. It was the first Piega speaker. They've been around for a long time, but it was the first one I had really sat down and listened to, and I was extremely impressed with it. That was another big surprise for me.
And this speaker is shockingly unique in that it has, I don't think I've ever seen this before. It has a coaxial, I don't know if we emphasize this, ribbon tweeter. So the mid-range is a ribbon and the tweeter is a ribbon and it's coaxial. I don't think I've ever seen that before. I think that's super interesting. That's so cool.
That's kind of Piega's thing. They kind of came up with this design. You'll see it in most of their speakers all the way up to their big ones. You can look at it and it looks like, it's some kind of a ribbon driver. And then when you look up, you'll see that there's a smaller ribbon in the middle, and it's surrounded by a larger one. And what it did was it just gave this really coherent sound, and it was a really impressive soundstage as well. It was detailed. I got so much information on the music, but it was such a nice, relaxing sound as well. So it was one of my favorite stand-mounted monitors as well. And then there's one more I want to say that was really impressive. That was the Gershman Studio XDB speakers. And these are the speakers that they have their own integrated stands because the stands open up into the enclosures and actually they expand the internal volume. These are speakers, they went down to 23 hertz. And a lot of times, like I dealt with that with the audio note, it's like it's 23 hertz when you use the side walls and the back walls as reinforcement for the sound. It's like, no, the Gershmans you can plop out in the room and they're still giving you really meaty, thick, powerful bass. And you combine that with this really smooth and warm and easy delivery that it sounded very different from the other two ways I had in this year. But man, it was one of my favorite. It was just very, very nice speaker. Floor standing speakers.
And then everyone's favorite category.
Big speakers.
Big speakers. If you're someone who enjoys high-end or just enjoys looking at it in addition to this is the category for you, my friends. Big dogs. Mark, tell us what is the latest recommendations for floor standing speakers.
Okay, so first there's a couple of floor standing models that were surprises. They were great values. The first one is the Acoustic Energy AE509 that Matthew Partrick reviewed. And these are $3,700 a pair. And you probably know Acoustic Energy is a British speaker maker, and they achieved some notoriety years ago for the AE1 mini monitor. Was the first time somebody came out. It was a mini monitor that came out for $1,500 a pair, and it was one of the very first models that was basically show a little speaker could be a premium speaker as well. And so I always kind of thought of AE being an expensive brand, whatever. It's like, no, these new speakers that they're making right now are very high performance for the money. $3,700 a pair. Matthew was so impressed with them. And then the other one would be really quick is Triangle. Everybody says triangle. Mm-hmm. And the Triangle, which has always been a popular brand and gets a lot of coverage, they seem to be doing some great designs lately because some of the speakers we're hearing from them are just fantastic. And the first one, the Triangle 40th Anniversary Antal, which is a tower speaker that Greg Neville reviewed. Under $5,000 a pair, he wanted to pick them then and now as the best value winner for 2023. That's how much he loved these. And I just found out just a couple of days ago that he loved that speaker so much that he went upscale up into the Triangle line and bought their flagship, which is the Magellan Quatuor. I don't even know how to pronounce that, which is $20,000 speaker they have, because he was looking for a killer pair of speakers. And just out of the blue, he said, hey, I want to put these in the buyer's guide. And I'm like, I didn't even know you bought these. He bought them. He loved them. He heard them. He was going to review them. And he just bought them outright. So that's always a good sign. We have quite a few entries in the buyer's guide this year where our reviewer bought the product because he loved it so much. And that's always one of the highest forms of praise you can do is, I bought it. I couldn't live without it. So Triangle, doing fantastic. So those are at the affordable end of it. But what I did was I kind of opened it up a little bit on the top end because I felt that 2023 was a year where we heard some great state-of-the-art speaker systems for the first time that really blew us away. And the problem with a lot of these speaker systems is that they're just not sending them out for review. They either sell every model they get, or they just can't afford to make them, send it around to everyone, and then have it come back all beat up. It's just they lose so much money on it. So we have to go out and we have to find these speakers where they are and listen to them. I did a lot of that this year. So we had, of course, at Munich, I was involved with the Bugatti for Title thing, which was the most fantastic thing I heard this year. But we also had other big speakers come out that blew our minds. One is the Acora Acoustics VRC1. I just think that it was just a fantastic design. We have the Boris and the M3 and the M6s, which is they're just taking their R&D. There's no stopping them. They could just keep going and going and going and come up with more speakers. and the Titles. And Titles has some new speakers this year that are absolutely fantastic. So you'll see more things, the big ones, the expensive ones. Greg Weaver spent time with the Magico M9s, which are $750,000 a pair. That's the most expensive speaker I think we've ever put in the buyer's guide. It's in there now because one of our reviewers got some real seat time with it.
So do you have any kind of final thoughts on 2023 moving into 2024 for our listeners?
Well, 2023 was, for me personally, it was a busy year. And this year, I'm not sure if things are going to change for this coming year. We just have so many reviews that are coming out for everyone. So, stay tuned for that. We're not slowing down. We still have a few months before going to all the shows, which takes up a lot of our time sometimes. It did in 2023. We're having fun. We've got new writers. Getting some really nifty equipment is headed our way. I think 2024 is going to be a very exciting year for Part-Time Audiophile.
I think it's going to be nifty. I like that. 2024, nifty all the way.
Nifty all the way.
Guys, thank you for tuning in with Mark and Brian on the podcast. The other Mark and Brian, as I like to say, if you're from Los Angeles.
Yes, which I am.
Mark, thank you for all the hard work. We're looking forward to everything coming out in 2024.
All right, thanks, Brian.
The Occasional Podcast is a production of the Part-Time Audiophile Network, which includes parttimeaudiophile.com, The Occasional Magazine, the PTA Newsletter, and audiohead.com. You can stay in touch with us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. The Occasional Podcast is produced and hosted by Brian Hunter, executive produced by Scott Hall at PTA Productions. The Occasional Podcast and its original associated music is monitored, mixed, and mastered on the Focal Trio 6 BE studio monitors. If you haven't already, please subscribe to The Occasional Podcast on iTunes, Google, Spotify, or wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.